Halloween. Or, as I like to call it, Second Pride. It's an invitation to go completely over the top with freaky outfits and mercilessly mock the people who don't. It's that transgressive time of year when spooky and sexy become one. Then again, every day is Halloween for me because holidays are meaningless and don't matter. But have your fun. While everybody's running around dressing like sexy vampires, I figured we'd take a look at a vampire movie that has some serious drip. Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Hank Hippopopoulos' hip-hop hypothesis Dracula. It's a movie that's spooky and sexy. Mainly sexy. Entirely sexy, actually. Listen, it's not my fault that Keanu Reeves can't do a British accent and makes me laugh when I should be terrified.
We can be married when I return. All right.
Greetings, my good bitches. The name's Francis Ford Coppola. I'm an editor, comedy writer, drag artist, and I'm here because— wait, Tom Waits is in this movie too? The fuck? There's a lot to love about Dracula 92, from Gary Oldman's abs, to its inventive use of practical effects, to our neurodivergent king, Anthony Hopkins.
Otherwise your precious Lucy will become a bitch of the devil! Taken blood of Christ! She is the devil's concubine!
But today, I'm using this movie as a convenient opportunity to talk about the work of Eiko Ishioka, costume designer, art director, graphic designer, and fucking genius. Ishioka broke into film after designing the posters for the Japanese versions of Apocalypse Now, and on the strength of her work in design and advertising, writer-director Paul Schrader hired her to be the production designer on his film Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters. You know the one, you silly sailor. That one movie about the gay Japanese author who tried to instigate a coup in the 70s before committing ritual suicide with his militia of teenager soldier boyfriends. I should do a video on that movie. It's definitely gay and Japanese enough for this channel. After that, Ishioka was in contact with the other Francis, and he picked her to design the costumes for Dracula. This was a somewhat unusual choice given that Ishioka was only an art director and graphic designer, and had never before designed costumes. But Coppola's hiring practices on this movie were unconventional, to say the least. Keep in mind, Coppola fired his VFX supervisor for merely suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the ideas that Coppola had in his head could only be achieved through CGI. So he then hired his own totally inexperienced son to do the effects instead via old school film compositing. When you take a risk like this, sometimes the end result is unintentionally hilarious, sometimes it works perfectly, and sometimes it's just Coppola literally peacocking. I finally used the word literally in the correct way, so you all can get off my ass about that now. Anyway, in Coppola's own words, he took a chance by hiring Ishioka, but his artistic vision had perfect chemistry with hers. Ishioka's official title was costume designer, but she really designed the look of the whole movie. As Coppola put it, the costumes were the set. They were the base for the entire design of the movie. The mise-en-scène grew from and revolved around Ishioka's wardrobe. The result was quite possibly the most extra movie ever made, but in the best way. So today, we're gonna do something a little different. No roasts, no reaction videos, no scene-by-scene breakdowns. Though I will admit, that's mainly because the storytelling and filmmaking in this movie are so batshit insane that I don't know how I would go about analyzing it. In this video, I'll be talking about why every single costume in this movie drips, and I'll be ranking all of them. Do I really have time to do this? I don't, but how spooky, sexy, and creative they are, how well they mesh with the overall production design and film, and so forth. There are a lot of narcs out there who have criticized these costumes for not being historically accurate, i.e. being like one fucking decade off, as if they could do any better. So the historically accurate part will not be factored into my ranking because those people are wrong and stupid. On a scale of Ben Shapiro's wife's P-word to Aquaman, how tripped out is this movie? I am entirely kidding about that. There is not a single weak link in this movie. Everyone is serving. So without further ado, I, Coke Francis, Ford Coppola, certified fashion cop, will be ranking every costume in Bram Stoker's Dracula. But before I do, if you are a fan of watching a very tired drag queen talk about nerd shit forever, I ask that you please make a long, arduous journey up to a beautiful castle somewhere in Transylvania. As you lay there, frozen in fear, as multiple succubi surround you, allow them to kindly unzip your pants so that you can dick slap those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. Just so you at least kind of know what's going on, here's the elevator pitch for Bram Stokera's Dracula. In this version of the story, our titular vampire was the original Vlad the Impaler. After his beloved wife Elisabetta commits suicide, he vows to avenge her death, becomes a vampire, and wages a war with God. Fast forward a few centuries later, and a solicitor named Jonathan Harker comes to visit Dracula's castle, and Dracula catches a glimpse of Jonathan's fiancée Mina, who Dracula believes to be the reincarnation of Elisabetta. So, Dracula travels to London to find her, seduce her, and most importantly, fuck shit up. And, of course, hilarity ensues. I'll be ranking the costumes from S to C because, let's face it, D-list costumes are non-existent in Bram Stoker's Dracula. There aren't really any C-listers either, but the ones that are ranked as C are only because they're being compared to the S and A-listers that set the bar higher than I am right now. On that note, first up, C-listers. This one's kind of obvious. The priests at the beginning. They look like they're straight out of a Byzantine painting. But are their costumes particularly special? Not really. We've all seen that fabric in Santee Alley. Oh my god, I already feel like such a dick for making this part of the video. Next, this brownish red dress that Mina's wearing. Now, I'm sure if we could see the whole thing, it would be lovely, but we only see the top, like, third of it. Here are some of Quincy Morris's outfits. Since the character is from Texas, he's only allowed to dress as a cast member from Frontierland. It's probably just because he's a minor character, but his outfits were definitely some of the most underwhelming compared to the others, and they all kind of fit him awkwardly. Again, not bad, never bad, just underwhelming. It's fine. He was the most boring out of Lucy's suitors anyway. Same goes for Lord Arthur Holmwood, though I will say his suits are tailored expertly and they look dapper as all hell. I'm pretty sure if you look up the word dapper in the dictionary, you will find a picture of Cary Elwes. Okay, this is not an attack in any way on Tom Waits' Renfield, one of my favorite characters in this movie, but again, this look is just a bit underwhelming compared to the others. Though the one notable thing about it are these metal hand braces he wears. Ishioka based them off a device that piano players would wear in the 1800s to correct their fingers. The implications as to why Renfield would be wearing these braces while locked up in an insane asylum are interesting and very disturbing. What was Renfield doing with his fingers that required correction? Anyway, it's a cool detail in an otherwise underwhelming design, but fear not, he makes up for it with another outfit in the A category. Stay tuned, good bitches. Like I said, no real C bees here. Onto the bees.
Not the bees!
Personally, I believe that all of Jonathan Harker's outfits are solid.
Bees!
They're not spooktacular, but let's face it, he's not a very spooktacular dude. We've got this nice Christian boy look as he tries to escape Dracula's castle. Think steampunk casual. I also really dig his other two main outfits because they're simultaneously old-fashioned and fashion-forward. The all-chocolate brown set and this green plaid suit are looks that you might actually see on a modern-day runway. Burberry Fall Collection. Here are two of the nicer outfits worn by Quincy and Jack Stewart. I don't really have that much to say about these pieces other than they are very authentic and fit very nicely on them. Moving on. We've got this green velvet number that Mina wears at the end. Mina's character arc is expressed through her costuming. At the beginning of the movie, she's sweet, innocent, and sexually repressed. So she wears a tight mint green dress that buttons all the way up her neck. By the end, her outfit is dark, loose-fitting, and sensual. Her relationship with Dracula had darkened her soul, but it also opened her up sexually, freeing her from constrictive Victorian society. You win some, you lose some. It's cool, but the symbolism is pretty much the only cool thing about it. The garment alone isn't a showstopper, but its ability to tell a story bumps it up to a bit. Speaking of symbolism and transformation, it's the same reason why I put Lucy's nightgown into this category. In early scenes, she wears this virginal white dress that, later on, becomes totally washed in red when she's turned into a vampire. Now we get into the outfits worn by Dracula himself. Let's begin with this slate gray ensemble that he wears in the streets of London. He is serving Victorian Gothic Jack the Ripper meets Guns N' Roses realness. This suit and stovepipe hat look so fly. It's almost too nice looking. It's not fantastical, but it does look fantastic on him. The purple sunglasses are also a really nice touch. This Dracula isn't killed by sunlight, but because he spends so much time in darkness, he still has to wear shades on an overcast day in England. As an editor, I can relate. Sometimes you'll find an extreme discount of this type of Victorian gentleman suit at like a Spirit Halloween, but this is the real deal. Top shelf. Dracula is a shapeshifter, so his costumes are too. Ishioka wanted Dracula's look to change in every scene, and it pretty much does. I love how he goes back and forth between 1400s and 1800s fashion, and sometimes even combines the two. This suit is kind of a combination of those two eras and closely resembles a dress that Mina wears at the very beginning, which I will talk about later. My only issue with it, and has nothing to do with the costume, is that I wish I could see more of it. Same goes for this dress that Mina wears on this ship. Clearly the silhouette is amazing, but I wish we could have seen more of it, like at her wedding. The color and composition of this wedding scene is, once again, straight out of a Byzantine painting. But girl, it's your wedding. I know Jonathan isn't as exciting as Dracula, and his English surfer dude accent is abysmal, but come on. Like, I know it makes sense in the story, because with Jonathan, Mina's outfits are much more conservative, while with Dracula, she's able to express herself much more freely, but that's not going to stop me from putting this wedding dress in the category. Speaking of brides, I wasn't originally going to bring up Dracula's brides because at first glance what they're wearing just looks like nighties, but there's so much more than that. I'll get into this more later, but Ishioka took a lot of inspiration from late 19th century art. Movements around that time had a habit of exoticizing foreign lands, particularly the women of those foreign lands. So this exotic sexualization is clearly present with Dracula's brides. With dangling earrings and chain headpieces, they are giving Arabian and Romani aesthetics, and I am here for it. Is it appropriative and a little bit exploitative? Maybe, but I'm too horny to care. There's also more than a little bit of a Jean Harlow look to these ladies. They share her affinity for belly dancing two-pieces. They are underrated, and I'm kicking myself for not noticing earlier. That being said, I'm saving Lucy's white dress for last because it's almost an A for me. Just like with everything else, there's an incredible amount of attention to detail here, and is definitely one of the most authentic looking pieces of this film. It's just not as amazing as the ones I'm going to talk about. Okay, time to turn this shit up to 11. On to A's. First, we get this incredible green dress at the very beginning that we actually get full frontal of. This is the look I was referring to earlier with one of Dracula's suits. It's giving a hybrid of Renaissance and Byzantine all in one. It's all the more reason that the dress Mina wears at the end of the movie felt so underwhelming, because she set the bar too damn high. So there's one character you only see for a few seconds in this movie. It's Jonathan's carriage driver. We don't know who he is. We don't know what his deal is. All I can tell you is that he is absolutely fucking terrifying. Like the scariest thing you see throughout the duration of this film. You know how hard it is to genuinely terrify me, and how much I love a good eagle-themed look. That alone puts this mystery man in the A category. I am Baba shook. Onto this light blue gown that Mina wears in the garden, and much to everyone's delight, in the rain. It looks like falling rain and is very late 1800s. I don't really have too much to comment on with this one other than it just looks fucking stunning on her. Same goes for this seafoam green dress that Lucy wears, and I can't imagine anything better to wear to meet up with my 3 suitors. I'm not crazy about the pattern on the dress, though I know the point of all the intertwining snakes is supposed to represent her sexual liberation, but either way, the color is so unique and complements her red hair so nicely. Let's talk about the best aspect of this movie for a minute. Neurodivergent King Anthony Hopkins playing an equally neurodivergent Van Helsing.
Yes, the devil's concubine!
Now, his outfits remain pretty much the same throughout the movie aside from diversifying his accessories. This makes sense for the character considering he's a man who's busy fighting vampires and doesn't have time to think about fashion. Just like Einstein, he probably has a closet full of identical suits so he doesn't waste brain power trying to decide what to wear in the morning. But let's take a close look at the detail on his coat. It literally looks like wood. Like a tree, Van Helsing stands firmly rooted in his mission. Also, vampire steaks are made from wood. Just saying. I don't know if that was the thinking behind Van Helsing's look, but knowing Ishioka's attention to detail, it probably was, and is such a nice touch. Such a great rendition of this character. This next one might be a bit controversial because I know a lot of people hate on this look. I don't understand why, and I understand why. Yes, in a way it swallows her because she's so tiny, but the costume itself is, without a doubt, a mid-1500s Elizabethan fantasy. Don't forget, a big part of high fashion is about the silhouette that's created, and fuck the haters, I love the silhouette that this piece creates. Plus, it gets even better later on. You'll see. But before trying on her wedding dress, she wears this little number while being seduced by Dracula in his jacked man-beast form. I mean, how could you say no to this face? For this scene, Ishioka wanted Lucy to stand out against the dark moonlit set dressing, so she chose a very unnatural, very erotic red-orange color. In Ishioka's words, it was the most orange she had ever used in a look. It's the best warm look on Lucy and definitely complements her body better than her other outfits. The other best warm look though, this red one that Mina wears during a candlelit waltz with Dracula. Lydia Dietz could never for. This is one of the costumes in this movie that I would kill to wear myself. Out of all the dresses that Mina wears in this movie, this one is the most fitting for a bride of Dracula, and signifies the point where she's been fully seduced by Gary Oldman's abs and forehead. Seriously, you could land a plane on either one of them. And check out the white suit he's wearing when he finds out Mina's marrying that lobotomized Burberry fall beta cuck. Now this is a wedding tux if I've ever seen one. This is technically more of a B tier look, but transitions are good to have when writing a video. It may surprise you to see the next two that I put in the A category. Firstly, Jack Stewart's disheveled, sickly, and raw Victorian masculinity. It's the perfect outfit for the drug-addled operator of an insane asylum and looks like Sweeney Todd meets the pirates or something. Secondly, Renfield's straitjacket that he somehow manages to free himself from. He keeps it on, of course, because it looks amazing and is much better than that jumpsuit he was wearing earlier. This one gives me big Tim Burton energy for obvious reasons, but when he holds his arms out, it actually reminds me so much of a look that Willow Pill did when she was on Drag Race. Still, the real main event here is this little moment in the background. Also giving more Tim Burton and Sweeney Todd vibes is this dress that Mina wears towards the end, and is the last time we see her in a traditional Victorian outfit. God, Winona Ryder and a smart little hat with gray and white pinstripe sleeves. How is it that the best Tim Burton vampire movie is the one that Tim Burton had nothing to do with? Finally, the list we've all been waiting for. These are the costumes that have become cultural artifacts in the history of cinema, and where we really get to see Ishioka's talents at their absolute zenith here. Time for the S tier. Let's start off with an obvious one. Granny Palpatine, Dracula's red, white, and gold getup when Jonathan first meets him. Just look at the train on this thing. This is Dracula in the most classical sense. This is how an ancient, rich Romani bloodsucker should look. The intricacies of the gold embroidered phoenixes on the red cape can be seen in wide shots. Also, let's not forget the hair and makeup present here, for which this movie also won an Oscar for. The big heart-shaped hair and the long ponytail, it's otherworldly and almost genderless. Dracula is so fucking old, he's transcended all human social conventions. So some of you might not know this, but in post-production for big budget movies and TV, a surprisingly big amount of the VFX budget actually goes into just fixing wig lines. If, in fact, this movie was done without the aid of special effects and was entirely practical, Dracula's wig and makeup are immaculate. Okay, moving on. As we've seen, Mina wears a large collection of bustle dresses, but there's a reason these two are the most memorable and famous. They're just so good. As I've stated, there's a lot of symbolism to be found in Mina's outfits. The different shades of green signify her rebirth as this new person, but as she starts to fall back into the hands of Dracula, her clothes start to resemble more of that emerald green that she wears in the prologue back when she was Elisabetta. They're also fundamentally different from what her best friend Lucy wears. Mina's more prim and proper, so her clothes are more buttoned up and restricted, while Lucy's long flowy dresses and exposed shoulders show her free spirit and, you know, being in her hoe phase. But again, the fit, the silhouette, the attention to detail is what really makes these dresses stand out, and I'm so glad they get as much screen time as they do. Remember when I said Lucy's wedding dress gets even better? Post-vampire transformation, bloodbath, and eventual death, this Elizabethan-inspired look gets a truly nightmarish twist when her headpiece starts to resemble Dracula's hair from earlier. Nothing about her look in this scene is safe or sensible. It's the complete opposite of Victorian restraint. It is opulent and terrifying. Ishioka actually pointed to the Australian frilled lizard as her main inspiration for this look, which uses its collar to ward off enemies when it feels threatened. Though Lucy is by far the most threatening thing in this room right now. This gold robe wardrobe that Dracula wears in his dying moments is hands down the most intricately detailed piece in the entire goddamn movie, even more than his red cape he wears when he meets Jonathan. This is the Byzantine moment. This look was actually directly inspired from a Klimt painting. Coppola straight up asked Ishioka, hey, can you make a costume that looks like this? Again, I'll be going more into the late 19th century art influences later in this video. Dracula wears this piece as he lays bleeding on the floor, quoting Jesus's words, trying to reconcile his life and his relationship with God. We love a drama queen. Okay, moment of truth. This is the look from Bram Stoker's Dracula that I am absolutely obsessed with. His Vlad the Impaler armor from the very beginning of the film. He is straight up looking like the colossal titan here. The fact that it looks like intertwined blood vessels and muscles is almost too on the nose, but it works so well. Bulging muscle and no skin. Imagine being on a battlefield and this guy shows up to impale you. It's as intimidating as it is beautiful. And to top it off, the helmet resembles a wolf, which he becomes later. Are you fucking kidding me? Dracula's armor represents Ishioka's knack for blending together Eastern and Western art influences. The plate mail is European, but the muscular pattern and red color and animalistic touches are pure Japanese anime. Introducing this look right at the start of the film clues the audience in on what they are in for the next 2 hours and 7 minutes. It's basically saying, hey, welcome to the bloodiest fucking drag ball you've ever seen in your life. Apparently, this costume was actually the hardest to maintain while shooting this movie. There's actually behind the scenes footage of pieces of this costume flying off of Gary Oldman from moving around too much, and Gary Oldman said that the suit felt like being inside of a car accident. Fashion over comfort, as they say. Now, here's the real twist. Coppola said outright, I put all my money in the costumes. Ishioka said outright, I've never seen a Dracula film.
You what?
And yet a horror fantasy on the bombastic scale of Bram Stoker's Dracula was the perfect vehicle for Ishioka's absolutely bonkers imagination. I mean, Tim Burton had never read a Batman comic and he still made my favorite Batman movie of all time. His trademark aesthetic perfectly complemented the dark vibes of the DC universe and added a layer of whimsy to it that was never seen again in any of its successors. When I was in film school, I wrote 2 thesis papers on Batman Returns, so don't even try to argue with me on this one, honey. The fact that Burton had never read a Batman comic seems like it would be a detriment, but it instead allowed a fresh pair of creative eyes to adapt the source material into something new without deviating too far from all the reasons the public is super gay for Batman. And Ishioka, having never seen a Dracula film, seems to have the same effect. Also, both Batman Returns and Bram Stoker's Dracula were released in 1992. Ishioka is quoted as saying,
Dracula has a very cliché style. So Francis, I wanted to completely throw away this cliché look to create our own vision, which is not looks like a man or a woman or old or young or beast or a human. My image of the Dracula should have a million faces. It's almost like endless transformation.
And he really did. Holy shit. This Dracula was a shapeshifter in every sense of the word. Just like the literal peacocking scene in the movie's transitions, even the actual transformations between Dracula's states were bananas. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. Coppola pointed Ishioka to a book called Dreamers of Decadence by Philippe Julian, all about the symbolist painters of the 1890s, artists like Klimt who blended East Asian and Western aesthetics. This was also around the same time that the book Dracula was written by, you guessed it, the real OG, Bram Stoker. It makes sense that Ishioka, a Japanese artist, would want to express that hybrid culture in her designs. The story of Dracula was written during the Victorian era, a time when cultural cross-pollination was starting to enter the mainstream. It became became another staple of what's now known as Gothic literature, which allowed authors to explore topics that were still considered taboo by respectable society. Take the classics, for example. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a product of the Victorian fear of homosexuality. The short story The Great Godpan, a reflection of men feeling threatened by the idea of women being allowed to vote. Can't imagine why they'd feel that way. It's almost like they were gonna face consequences for treating women terribly or something. Dracula reflected several paranoias of the era, such as Christian theology being challenged, a fear of foreign immigrants living amongst society, and vampirism being a common metaphor for syphilis. Ideas were spreading all over the world like a virus, and the controlled Victorian landscape fostered an underground that was more bloody, erotic, and devious than ever before. And out of this chaotic cultural moment comes the story of a mysterious shape-shifting foreigner who swoops into town to fuck your wife and her best friend. Dracula is, in many ways, a story about cultural cross-pollination, so it's completely appropriate that the Luke of Eiko Bram Ishioka's Ford Coppola Stoker's Dracula, based on the novel Push by Sapphire, comes from multiple cultures and influences getting messed up and blended together. This hybrid culture Luke is the reason the '92 film is still remembered today. This is why I maintain that the not historically accurate critiques are complete bullshit. The whole point of this movie's aesthetic is to cross-pollinate an already cross-pollinated era. The deviation that occurred during the Victorian era became what's now known today as subcultures. In this movie, there are elements taken from high fashion, 80s rock and roll, traditional goth, even anime, and, most importantly, drag. Ishioka said herself that Coppola's version of the story would be told as if everyone had taken LSD, though I can't fathom watching this movie on LSD, especially with this guy staring at you. Her erotic and imaginative designs are just further proof that the best ideas, the ones that are memorable, come from conventions being fucked with. And what could be more queer than that? That's right, I made all of that tie into my opening joke. Halloween is second fucking Pride. Also, in case you needed another reason to love this woman and her contributions to cinema history, when doing costumes for The Cell in 2000, Jennifer Lopez asked Ishioka if she could make her costume more comfortable, and Ishioka replied by saying, "No, you're supposed to be tortured." As I stated earlier, this is the first time I've ever done like a ranking type video, so if you enjoyed this, please leave a comment below, because, as you know, I might just pick my favorite one and give you a shout out in the next video, like I'm about to do right now. Sonic Snout says, "I finally watched this. My pea brain takes a while to get to the longer ones." Don't say that about yourself. Usual gang of idiots. I understood that reference. Thank you. Another child from the early 2000s who skipped classwork to read Mad Magazine, I see. Your speech from about timestamp to timestamp, comparing the empty but fun cash grab id pool of the MCU to these Daily Wire abominations and the right-wing dipshits' reaction to both, is so spot on. I've tried to verbalize this before, but you really nail it in a way I couldn't. You introduced me to the word idpol, although I do have to give MCU credit though. Winter Soldier is the only movie I've ever seen in my life, particularly blockbuster type movies, that mentions Operation Paperclip by name. That's true. That's kind of ballsy in my opinion. I think that Operation Paperclip is how Wernher von Braun came to America after his career as a top Nazi scientist and high-ranking SS officer to become BFFs with Walt Disney. But I digress. Great vid, as always. Fingers crossed for a My Son Hunter review. So I actually was thinking of doing a My Son Hunter video, but then Nick DeRamio beat me to it, and he is by far the superior YouTuber. If you don't believe me, he's probably my biggest influence on my own work. Also, if you haven't seen Nick DeRamio's videos, please shut this off right now and go watch him. He is the best. But honestly, I just needed a break from conservative entertainment because my remaining brain cells are on thin fucking ice. If you haven't done this already, I ask that you please make a long, arduous journey up to a beautiful castle in Transylvania. As you lay there, frozen in fear as you're surrounded by multiple succubi, ask them to kindly unzip your pants so that you can dick slap those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. And, as always, until next time, howdy-o.